I've been trying to find, I know as we all have the right adjective for these times, and nobody's nailed it yet. There's been a lot of criticisms of the term unprecedented and all these things, but I think until you have a better idea, maybe don't throw some rocks out of your glass house. This is crazy. We don't know what it is. We haven't dealt with something like this before. And so we're all needing to very quickly adapt and respond and react and do all those things. And that's a lot for a leader. I would say that the normal day job of a leader is a lot, right? All of us are leaders, leading people, leading teams, leading organizations, needing to make the right decisions, even when the economy is good, when the politics are good, when the system's going well, when the employees are happy. Even that is a challenge, right? And we know that normally, right? Normally, even in good times, there's going to be that employee that's unhappy. There's going to be that conflict with a partner. There's going to be the grant or the contract that fell through, right? And these are some of the normal ups and downs of leaderships. And that generally is enough for, I would say, myself and most leaders to say, man, maybe I should just farm a little bit and garden and just get out of that role, right? Because that's a lot. Then you add this, right? You add a global pandemic. We need to completely change how we work. All of our clients and customers are completely changing how they work. So then we need to change even more. Oh, and on top of that, we might have a Great Depression coming. That might be even worse than the first Great Depression, right? And we'll leave out the political analysis right now, but a few adjectives come to mind there as well, right? So that is a lot for us to handle, right? And that's why we're here. And so we asked you, well, so what do you want to learn about? And I want to share just briefly, I'll share my screen here, just some of the things that you said you want to learn about. And we really put those into 4 basic categories. So one is you wanted support around how do I support other people right now? And also how do I support myself right now as a leader? And sometimes as leaders, we don't think about that second part. We just think about the supporting others piece, but it's really important to support ourselves too. And then there were a number of people who asked questions around uncertainty. If things are uncertain, how do I create and maintain motivation for my people? How do I maintain a sense of ownership? How do I grow a sense of ownership when we need everybody on board? Because as a leader, maybe I can usually hold it. I can't right now. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen in 2 months, nonetheless, 2 days. And then also, how do we plan? How do we plan amidst uncertainty? So there was a lot around that. Third, then, a lot of folks said, well, so how can we be more adaptable and resilient as organizations through a crisis? And also, how can we leverage crisis, which is interesting. The etymology of crisis is a Greek word. And it's actually specifically meant the turning point in a disease. So crisis is really about choice in a lot of sense. And we all know that crisis is really a place where a lot of ideas can be birthed and new ways of being can be birthed, right? Necessity is the mother of invention. So what are ways that creativity can come from this? And then Toby's piece, which I know lots of people on this call resonate with, and maybe a lot of people on this Zoom have never thought about, but you know, these are unprecedented times. Sorry for the adjective, but it's true. And so we need wisdom that goes beyond what we may have learned in our MBA or what we might get from Harvard Business Review. And so nature, it has been around for a while. Life has been around for 3.8 billion years, and there are some lessons that we can learn there as well. So just wanted to just briefly share, you know, what are some of those things that that you all are interested in covering. And so that's what we're going to cover today. And I want to start with that first piece, and really starting off with, and Marina, if you can share that slide, what can we do to support others, and also what can we do to support ourselves? And so one of the things I want to do is let's go into the chat right now, and I want to ask you, what are some of the range of feelings that your people are feeling right now? The people in your organization, somebody you may manage or that may report to you or that you may be leading, or even colleagues of yours, what are some of those range of feelings? So I'm seeing overwhelm. What are some of those range of fear, anger, anxiety, desire to cocoon, so withdrawing, uncertainty, boredom, maybe for some, and overwhelm for others. Some people right now don't have anything to do, and some people have 3 times more than their job to do. Grief, obsession. There's also some excitement, right? And there's some hope, and there's a feeling of antsiness and what's going to happen next, right? Maybe reliving some past trauma, some difficult situations, mental exhaustion, right? Anybody here feel less focused than usual? Anybody here feel like they're waking up and they just have not gotten enough sleep, even though it's the same time as it always is, right? So I want to turn it over to Shilpa, who works with leaders around the world. And Shilpa, let's start with that first question, insights that you have around what we can do right now to support those around us. Let's start there.
Thanks, Roni. I mean, thank you for all of you for sharing all of these feelings. I think the first thing we can do is really recognize that there are all of the feelings right now. This is really a yes and time. It's almost impossible to say, oh, this is the one thing I should be feeling. And I've been noticing a lot of people feeling guilt for feeling joy right now, or for feeling, feeling like I can't make sense of this because I shouldn't be tired, but I am tired. And I think the biggest thing we can do to support others is give permission for all of the different feelings that are out there, and really invite kind of a yes and approach to everyone we're with. Like, yes, it's okay that you're feeling grief right now, and then 20 minutes later you're feeling bored, and then 20 minutes later you're feeling happy that you have this break, and then 20 minutes later you're feeling whatever you're feeling. So the first thing is really making more space, making more permission for all of the different feelings that are out there. The second piece that oh, go ahead, sorry.
I can ask, what's the benefit that you see of that? Because I would imagine that some folks on this Zoom are totally sold on that, and others might be thinking, well, that can open up a can of worms, it could distract people, it might actually get them into a negative space. So I'm curious, what's the benefit that you see of that?
To me, it's better out than in. This is a big benefit, because things that are not spoken or not shared are just rattling around inside of us. And then we're kind of fighting with ourselves more than just putting it out there and creating an atmosphere where we can be supported and accepted for what's going on. As you said, and don't want to say, this is an unprecedented time. Like, people just don't know what to even feel sometimes. And the more permission we create as leaders, the more opportunity there is for people to show up with their whole selves, which is really what we can use right now. The more whole we can be, the better we can do whatever we're trying to do, whether that's take care of our families or our homes, take care of our work, our projects, whatever is there. So kind of trying to shelf half of ourselves or parts of ourselves and put them aside isn't going to really serve us right now. And when it's out and out in the open, then at least we can talk about it, and we can create more and more systems and ways of being together that can really serve everybody.
Great. And Shilpa, specific ways that you feel people can actually do that in organizational life in a way that may work if folks are busy, there's a lot to do. Maybe some folks are also a little more cautious about sharing how they feel, a little more introverted, or kind of a little fear of that vulnerability. Any tips that you use with?
Yeah. So a couple of tips. One is a really simple exercise that you can do. It could take like 5 minutes at the beginning of any meeting. It's called I Could Talk About. And you could just invite people to fill in the prompt, I could talk about. They don't have to talk about the thing, but they're just giving themselves permission to name about it, And so it could be going around in your Zoom chat and saying, I could talk about how hard it is to have my kid at home while I'm trying to work. I could talk about learning new recipes right now. I could talk about this. I could talk about that. I could talk about very vulnerable things too. And there's space for it, and the invitation is there for that vulnerability. And yet people have a choice at how much they want to share, so they can choose. At least it creates an atmosphere where we're recognizing the multiplicity of truths and experiences right now, which just makes more space for everybody. Another thing that we can do is really invite more check-ins, even again, and I love Zoom for these reasons. You can do breakout rooms, so people can check in pairs or in groups of 3. It doesn't, again, take a lot of time, 10 minutes, maybe 12 minutes, but everyone getting a moment to sort of drop in, have that moment of reflection, and be in an atmosphere where they're being listened to and supported really can increase morale, feel more supported, and also like result in more connection. Really important thing to remember when I'm listening to somebody is that I don't need to pick up or take on or solve or fix what they're saying. I mean, that is maybe one of the hardest things as leaders, is to not want to just find the solution and make it all right, but we can't right now. There isn't that possibility, even if there ever was. And so the more we can just listen, to bear witness, to be with people, to bear witness, is a way to think about it. The more we're with each other, the easier it is for all of us. And if we can listen and just allow and say thank you, and I hear what you're saying and I'm with you, that's often enough for folks. They don't need much more than that. So just to really try to listen in that way. So some check-ins, deeper listening without picking up. Try I Could Talk About if that works for you. Yeah, there's lots of little tricks, but those are a few just to offer right now.
That's great. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I think it's a really good reminder, because as leaders right now, we're needing to make a lot of decisions. We're needing to take in a lot of information. And even those of us who really care about folks, I know for myself, I have the two sides. There, my friends joke that my friends know when they call me if I'm working or not, because something changes in the tone of voice, right? Shereef's laughing. And so there's business Roni, and then there's the other Roni, right? And I think it's important to just continue to strive for the integration of those two, because the business side of us is really important. Whether you're in a nonprofit or a for-profit, you need to be making some really important decisions now. And if you wait, it could sink your organization. It's that critical. And Shereef and I'll talk about that in a moment. And at the same time, can we do that in a way that also holds space for people? You know, God forbid you need to let somebody go, you do it with heart, right? You need to tell somebody that their hours need to shrink. You do it with some presence and with some heart, and you let them have their feelings about it. And that is really hard. And it's hard for me. It's hard for me to have those conversations, and I want to avoid them. But just to be present with that and let people have those feelings. And even just to let people know, I care about you. I want you to know that the next 6 months might be tough. I don't know what I can guarantee, but I am so committed to you. And I really care about you. I'm going to do everything I can to have your back during this time, even though I can't promise what the outcome is going to be. I think that helps people just really relax and know that there's a leader out there who's got their backs, right?
Mm-hmm. And I would just add to that, Roni, too, just introducing moments of pause. You know, it does feel like things are moving a mile a minute, and yet making decisions from that place of like anxiousness and is not going to really serve you or the people you're working with. So can you introduce moments of pause, you know, 2 minutes of like grounding, taking a breath, you know, listening to the birds that we can finally hear right now, things like that actually are serving a lot to help people feel like they can like land on the ground, touch the earth, and feel like, okay, yeah, there's something there supporting me too. And then we can build out that supportive atmosphere more so that we make better decisions and are also able to communicate with that care and from that heart. Yeah.
And to remember that what gets people through, I think one of the lessons that I'm learning as well from this is there's a great debate happening on the planet right now. And I know what side I want to win, but I don't know what's going to happen. And the debate is, does our security rely on our interdependence, or does our security rely on our independence, right? So is it every nation for itself? Is it every state for itself? Is it every city for itself? Every political party, every person, every neighbor for itself? Every person buying as much toilet paper as they can, and screw everybody else, at least I have toilet paper, right? Or is it we're all in this together, right? If my neighbors don't have enough food, if they're not okay, then I need to be thinking about them, and I want them thinking about me, and so on and so on. And so this is really that time where we can think about strategies, and as leaders, we can think about actions that we're going to take. And I actually think that that's very important. And what may be even more important is cultivating a foundation on the team where everybody really feels like this team is me and I'm this team. And then we're going to get the best out of people. And then they're not going to freak out as much, right? Because when they freak out, they're not going to be thinking with their rational mind and making decisions. And they might just decide to, like somebody said, kind of crawl under that rock and not be the active participants that we need them to be. Shilpa, I want to talk to you briefly as well about what we can do to support ourselves, the big taboo of leadership, right? Because as leaders, we're supposed to have it all together. I don't feel stressed. I mean, I feel a little stressed, but we got this. Don't worry, it's going to be fine. And I don't really have time to take care of myself or go for that run or do the yoga or whatever it is. So would love to see what advice you have for folks and specific tips on taking care of ourselves as leaders.
You know, I'm trying to approach this time maybe like many of you as like there's a gift that's also here, and there's an opportunity that's here and something that's opening up here. And to me in my leadership, I'm really thinking about that portal as leadership, and how do I start to see this opportunity as a way to like change how I take care of myself, to invite in more of that interdependence that you were just talking about, Roni. Really, like, to take care of myself means to maybe invite and ask for more support, to actually maybe create spaces where maybe we can do these things together, like in my community and with friends, possibly, you know, let's set aside that time every day to exercise, or let's have that cup of tea in the afternoon and just like slow down and talk about other things and try to make that space. I don't know how to actually support people if my cup is empty. If I have nothing to give, there's no way for me to be a good leader in this time. So I'm trying to see this moment as an opportunity to really give ourselves a gift, give ourselves the gift of a pause, give ourselves maybe the gift of what I'm trying to do is even take computer-free hours or days, just like sort of taking a shutdown. And maybe there's something there that's deeper that I can journal through, that I can take time to draw or create through. You're going to talk about creativity later, but if I can't tap into my own creativity, that makes it really hard for me to also support what I'm trying to do, and as well as the people I'm working with. So supporting ourselves is vital right now. And I want to really, whatever the feelings of guilt or I can't do that, I want to just like invite you to put those aside, and see the benefit that there is to supporting yourself, because it's going to just shift so much. And we're in the process of creating community care, webs of community care, not just self-care right now. And so the more we practice that together, the more we invite other people to be part of our care systems, the more opportunities we're going to have to like take those things forward, which we're really going to need, you know, post social quarantine and now. So
Thanks,
yeah.
Shilpa. And I'm putting in the chat right now, would love to hear from the leaders on this call. What is one thing that you can do, or maybe you are doing, to support yourself right now? As a leader, I was on the phone yesterday, the day before, with Ken Wilkins, who's on this call, who's at a 1,000-person firm, you know, well on in his career. And we started talking about gardening. And he told me just how much he loves every day when he needs a break to just head out for a few minutes and be with the plants a little bit. And we talked about my garden and how much I love that too. And it's such a nourishing practice. And, you know, I think for myself, I feel that guilt sometimes, you know, hey guys, I'm going to sign off today at 4:30 and go for a jog because it's beautiful. And yet it's so ironic, because if I'm not taking that time, or if I'm feeling that guilt or communicating in a way that says sorry, it sends the message to the team that actually self-care should not be prioritized, right? Because I'm not prioritizing it, so you shouldn't either. And on the other hand, if I say it's 4:30 or it's noon and I'm going to go for a jog right now and I'll see you guys at 1, it sends the message to the team that go ahead and do that as well. Right? I trust you. I don't think you're going to take the whole day off and go to the beach right now. I know we're all working, and I'm going to trust you're adults. We're all going to trust each other that we're going to do what we need to do. So as leaders, we can model that. And when you're running a team or an organization, especially in tough times like this, you need that productivity and that focus to stay high, at least that focus. And so ironically, I think promoting self-care and modeling self-care is a great way for others to practice it as well. And then we do better, right?
Absolutely. And
there
are beautiful, beautiful ideas coming up in the chat. So I encourage everyone to take a look over there. It's really going to help us all to do this.
Calling my parents every day, yoga on Zoom. You know, you can find probably a few million yoga classes on Zoom these days. Don't leave us until noon, but then there's probably a bunch at noon. You know, do you need a couple of minutes to breathe? Do you want to do a 20-minute meditation? Simon Moyes is on this call. If we invite him to say a few words, you would notice his voice, because he's one of the voices on those meditation apps that you listen to sometimes, perhaps. You know, it's really easy to go find that tool right now. Do some exercise. There's no right way, right? I don't know that a pandemic is the right time to go become enlightened, right? I think it's a good time to fall back on the practices you already have. And we all have practices as leaders. So now's really the time to use those.
Mm-hmm. And if experiment, you know, maybe take a risk and try some new things out too, and get a buddy or a couple buddies to do it with. And it shifts the whole dynamic, really inviting in more of that care collectively as well.
Yeah. And even to take it one step further, maybe just a bit more radical, because I've been playing with this myself. You know, at the People Piece, we've had a third of our contracts canceled for the year. And that's a lot for a small organization to be dealing with. Now we have new contracts coming in too. It's very volatile, right? And so, hey, if we have less work to do in April and May, maybe instead of trying to get more work and freaking out about it, maybe we just go to 30 hours a week or 20, right? Because there isn't much to do anyway. So why don't we enjoy the spring, right? So I'm going to put that out there, that right now there are some folks who are sitting at home and there's actually really nothing to do because their customers are all closed. And then there's other folks who need to work double time. And so maybe some folks can take a break and then come in later, or maybe those folks who are taking a break now can help those folks who need to work double time, right? So that's a way to take care of ourselves and also of others. So much here. I love what everybody's writing. I see our People Piece calendar, and there's often, you know, Jess will put, or other members will say, you know, family time. And is that, oh no, that's their family time. We're using our Zoom links to just set up some family time. I love this remove self-criticism piece that somebody added in there. We all have those inner critics. If you're a leader, you're on this call, you're an achiever, you have a strong inner critic, most likely, that you've worked with and wrestled with and maybe integrated some. And so that voice is saying, what are you doing? You need to stay at your computer, you need to focus, you need to get the money, you need to get the people. And maybe it's just a time to say thank you, and I'm actually gonna go for a walk right now and practice that. hot baths, Doritos, and 80s comedies. Let's leave it at that and go to our next topic. Okay, so let's say that you've put that oxygen mask on yourself and you're breathing easy and you're listening to Simon Moyes on Headspace or Wisdom Labs or wherever it is, and you're feeling good and groovy and you're gardening and your people are feeling good. Now you actually have work to do, right? And I want to go over to Shereef right now to talk about this really interesting topic that that many of you asked about, and of course is part of the topic of this webinar as well, which is what do we do when our people want certainty, right? When maybe you have some folks who are a little anxious on your team, right? They're often the high achievers are, and they really want to know some certainty, and you cannot give that to them right now. And so I really want to explore that question with Shereef a little bit. He's been in that startup role, which by nature is volatile, and it's more volatile than ever right now. So Shereef, curious for reflections and guidance you might have for leaders on that topic.
Yeah, sure. First, I just want to say, Shilpa, I really enjoyed the things you were saying about how to take care of yourself. I want to throw in one more quote that I really love about self-care, which is, I don't remember who to attribute it to, but it's something like, when my life is not that busy and not that hectic, I meditate for 30 minutes a day. When my life gets stressful and I'm too busy, I meditate for an hour a day. And it's just like, you know, increasing the self-care when things are more not, it's so natural to be like, I'll take care of myself later, but that's actually leveling up. I always love that. But to answer your question, Roni, I feel like one of the biggest things I've learned, and I'm still learning, and Roni was a big part in helping me learn this, is that when somebody's coming to me for answers in times of uncertainty, a big part of what it is to be a leader is to be a container of ambiguity. And so I really like this definition, a container of uncertainty, a container of ambiguity. As a leader, I'm looking at a landscape that is by nature foggy. And these days, the fog is like 10 times more. I used to be able to see 3 feet ahead of me. Now I can only see 2 inches ahead of me. So it's a much bigger fog. But my job is generally to filter this ambiguity, and for the people who I'm leading, let some of it in, but not all of it in. So to give you an example, if you're leading a startup and I'm not really sure about the next funding round, where it's going to come from, there's details about this investor and that investor and this investor, I can't go with my organization and let all of this ambiguity filter into them, because they're going to be worried about the funding round, but that's not their concern. Their concern is another part of the business. They can't be worried about all the things I'm worried about. So by nature, as leaders, we're used to having a lot of ambiguity, containing that ambiguity, and then being very deliberate about what of that ambiguity do we filter past to our people. Now, because the ambiguity is a lot more, we might be feeling a lot more pressure ourselves. So when someone is coming to us for an answer, it's very tempting to feel bad that we don't have one. But truly, if you think about the kind of leader you want, if I'm following someone, I want her to not say that she knows when she doesn't know. I want her to say, I don't know, and we'll figure it out together. I want her to pass on some of that ambiguity onto me so that I can step into my own leadership as well. So to be specific here, to give you an example, when someone comes to you for an answer, I don't know is a great first thing to say as a leader. Think about how stressed we are about when our leaders right now are pretending to know when they don't. It's just adds stress. What I'm wanting is someone as a leader who's confident that we'll figure it out together. And so be deliberate about what ambiguity you want to share with the person who's following you, what ambiguity you want to keep to yourself, and then be in that ambiguity with them and support them into stepping into their own leadership. So this may look like, these are the things we don't know. I'm going to be clear about the things that we don't know. These are the things that we're not going to get into right now. We're going to decide that later. Now let's get to this thing that we don't know together, and I'll be with you in that inquiry. And the confidence comes from, I have a leader who I can inquire with. I have a leader who I can be in that ambiguity with and who's going to support me in asking the right questions. Because really we want to come to the answer ourselves, ideally. And so this is actually a great opportunity to spread the ambiguity or the uncertainty in your organization deliberately. You can't walk in and be like, I don't know anything. You know, like, here's all the things I don't know. But you can be like, okay, there's more that we don't know right now. And these are the things we're going to decide later. These are the things that we're going to be in the not knowing with together. And I really want someone to guide me through the not knowing, not someone who knows everything. So that's really the first distinction that I want to make here.
Yeah, what I'm hearing, I love that, Shereef. And I love how you take these concepts and put them into models, because you're an engineer and there are other engineers on the call as well. And so the engineers might be thinking, okay, but Shereef, so what's the exact right, like what percent, right? And of course that's not really a question we can answer, but I wonder if you can go in a little bit deeper, and as a leader, how might you determine what goes in what bucket? And I mean in the head, but maybe in the heart or in the body, you feel into it. Like, how do you know? Because there is no percentage, right?
No, there's no percentage. I mean, ideally what I'm trying to do is look at everyone in my organization and say, do they have as much ambiguity as they need for their leadership to be stretched? Mm-hmm. If they have more, they're in the tear zone. And it's my responsibility to remove some of the ambiguity from them. If they have less, then I'm not really allowing them to step into their leadership. I'm just trying to do everything myself. And so I'm just looking around. I'm like, okay, I've got Toby, Shilpa, and Roni on my team. And Roni is just overwhelmed, you know? I need to be with him more in that ambiguity and say, okay, you know what, Roni, we're gonna remove these levels. Toby seems to be well-resourced, and I'm gonna be, all right, Toby, here's a whole area of ambiguity. It's now yours, you know? Lead us through that. And so I really look at it as kind of a resource management of the uncertainty and how much I can let filter through into my team. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. And so what we're doing really is we're staying really attuned to our people. And that's where that people piece comes in, right? And it's also different for every person, like you said, right? I probably would want a little more of that grounding from you, and maybe Toby would love the ambiguity. I don't know.
Yeah, and avoiding the temptation to project certainty when what's needed is confidence, and these are completely different things. The certainty is I know. The confidence is I don't know, and we'll figure it out together.
Say more about that, Shereef, because right now everybody is stressed. Everybody, even the meditators, are stressed to some extent, and some people are very stressed, and some people are almost panicking, and some people are panicking, and these are people who are looking to us not only for business guidance, but organizations are really our homes. They're our second families these days, right? And what's your take on how we project confidence when we ourselves may be really unsure and stressed ourselves?
Well, I would start by saying I'm being stressed and unsure. I can be stressed, unsure, and confident. They're just not the same thing. So for example, somebody comes up to me, let's say, in this example, a friend or a neighbor comes up, I'm really stressed out. I don't know how we're gonna come out of this quarantine. I don't know when my kids are gonna go back to school. I don't know when the vaccines, the test, and there's a big list of things. And I can say, these things stress me out too. First thing we're gonna do is take all of the questions that are not in your control right now and push them out to the future. Whether or not my kids will go back to school next August, not a decision for right now. We're going to remove that ambiguity. Whether or not the tests will be available, we don't know. We're going to remove that ambiguity. Whether or not I should go out and go to the grocery store tomorrow, I don't know the answer to that question, but that's a decision we need to make right now. I will be with you in that not knowing, and let's break it down. So the first thing, you filter out all the uncertainty that you cannot decide about right now, and then company in the ambiguity that is about today, or maybe tomorrow, or maybe next week, things that I can actually make decisions about.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, this is so rich. Anybody want to do a day on this topic? I feel like we need it. Yeah, I'm seeing some thumbs up and nods. Well, we'll talk at the end maybe about follow-ups to this. Shereef, let me ask you one more question, and then let's go over to Toby. And just a reflection too. I think what you're saying too, it treats people like adults, like the adults that they are. And I know you like to treat your kids as adults too. So we really should probably be treating everybody as smart, resourceful humans who also get it. Whether or not we're saying it, they get it, right? They know if we're stressed as a leader. So might as well just say, I have some anxiety about this. This is unknown, but let's all talk about it together. And there's maybe a sense of relief that comes in there. And my sense as a leader too is that can drive a sense of ownership, is to actually say, not only am I not sure, but I really need your help right now. I need all of us in this together to figure this out. If we need to cut costs by 30%, I'd love everybody's ideas on that. Or I'm not sure about a couple of these things in an appropriate way, I'm gonna ask you about them, right? Who has new ideas, new ways of being, streamlining our operations? And that, what you're saying, when we invite people in or just acknowledge the ambiguity, then the ownership can go up as well. What specific advice might you have about planning in amidst ambiguity, because having run a bunch of startups, by nature, we're planning in ambiguity.
Yeah, so the first thing is, I think what I've been saying, I'll repeat it because it's worth bearing. Decisions that can't be made right now, we'll just push them forward. The other thing is, get comfortable and make your team comfortable with the fact that we're going to be planning with imperfect information. We're always planning with imperfect information, but now we're just going to say, hey, these next few decisions we'll need to make over the next 2 weeks, we're going to have less information than we need for the ideal decisions. So, you know, like Shilpa was saying, like you were saying, get rid of that inner critic. We're going to be making imperfect decisions. Everybody comfortable with making imperfect decisions? Let's make some imperfect decisions. Because, you know, we want to make good ones. And so these are not going to be regret-free decisions. We're going to make them imperfect decisions. That's the second thing. And I would say focus on the process of planning rather than the outcome of the plan, right? And so, you know, ideally, us sitting together and planning, what that does is it clarifies the questions, it clarifies the decisions, it clarifies timelines, and then let's not be stressed out if we need to throw out this plan in a week. And I would say that. I would say right now, usually we need to revise our plans every 3 or 4 months. In uncertain times, we need to revise every 2 weeks. So yeah, when you're making plans with imperfect decisions, and this plan is going to be held even more lightly than the other plans before. Yeah, lightly held plans, shorter decision span, more imperfect decisions.
So if only we had some sort of example that's been around for a long time that actually iterates really quickly and has been really successful. Toby, any ideas on that front? I want to turn it over to Toby here.
Maybe, yes. I am loving this conversation with these brilliant folks, the folks who've been speaking and the folks in the chat. Lots and lots of great ideas coming. Thank you. And I want to focus our attention specifically on what we might learn from nature. And really, with a particular focus on how we can build our adaptive capacity. A lot of folks have been talking about that. The natural world can be a huge inspiration for that. And I know that many people on this call are totally sold on understand biomimicry, know biomimicry, turn to nature as part of their regular practice, but not everybody. So why would we do this? I just want to reinforce a little piece of this. You know, as I mentioned earlier, one flow into my work for 28 years has been doing leadership development and organizational change and working with leaders in all kinds of different ways. And in the last decade or so, a big flow into my work has been about studying nature and natural systems as model and inspiration for how we can guide our human systems. If we're trying to live here sustainably, let's turn to the 3.8 billion years of evolution. So what I'm seeing about this pandemic is that it really calls us to think on a systemic level. Now more than ever, let's tune into the R&D that the natural world has been doing and see what the rest of nature has already tested and proven. So life has been adapting and evolving through lots of volatile and uncertain times for a very long time. And of all the species that have ever lived on Earth, this is a very interesting fact, only 1% still survive. The other 99% have either gone extinct or they've adapted into another form. So that means that these beautiful friends with whom we share our planet, they're now the survivors. And they've honed all kinds of ways to live successfully through lots of disruption, through lots of uncertainty, through lots of change, both rapid and slow. Now, it's natural for us as humans, we've heard about this on this call, we want to stabilize after a disruption, right? It's natural that we want our fear and our sense of threat wants us to hunker down. We want to cut our losses. We have this impulse to secure our finances. We want to hoard toilet paper, right? We want to become more efficient. But in fact, even though most of our businesses are designed to be efficient, efficiency doesn't create resilience, unless maybe you're in the toilet paper business. But efficiency can make things go smooth and fast when things are certain. But in times of uncertainty, we want to develop other capacities. So Charles Darwin, the father of natural selection, has been misquoted in many ways. But this is actually what he said. It's not the strongest that survives, nor the most intelligent, but those that are most responsive to change. So I'm wondering, during this pandemic time, during this pause, can we use this time to develop that responsiveness, to build our capacity to be adaptive, to actually redesign our organizations and our businesses so that they're designed to adapt to change, so that maybe they recognize that disturbance can be an opening for regeneration. If we look to the natural world, what we see is that disturbance can actually free up resources, right? So that which has been bound gets distributed and dispersed, and the energy and nutrients that were part of the system in its previous state, they become available to help other things emerge, and it starts a process that's called, in nature, it's called succession, where that's a system-wide adaptation, where a whole set of organisms and processes that were there before have now made way for an entirely new phase to begin and grow. And they've actually set the stage for the new phase to be successful. I think that's what we're in the midst of now. In my organizational life, I've learned about, there's a whole body of work called adaptive leadership. Many of you may have heard of it. Ron Heifetz and others have written many books about that. It actually starts with a basic premise that comes from evolutionary biology. And what that premise is that when an organism in the natural world confronts suddenly challenging conditions, as we are, they either will perish or they'll adapt. And adapt and evolve, perhaps for the sake of their whole species. So that successful adaptation calls for three things. First, you need to preserve the DNA that's essential for the species' survival. And we need to be doing that too. When you think about your organization, when you think about your business, what is absolutely core to your business? How do you preserve that? How do you protect that? How do you be sure that you're deliberately bringing that forward from who you used to be to who you might be becoming? It's important for us to know what our own core DNA is. And then organisms will discard the DNA that no longer serves their current needs. So if you're coming out of the sea and onto land for the first time, you will adapt and evolve in a way that you lose your gills and you lose your fins, right? We can do that too, only we have to do it more quickly now. How can we release those things that we're still trying to do that aren't going to work now, right? I used to think that my work was about flying on airplanes all over the world and the country and gathering groups of people in a room and having powerful transformative experiences together. This climate, these conditions do not support that. So I'm letting go of that. And I'm sure that that's happening in your organizations too. And then once you know what has to be preserved, what you can afford to discard, then the other piece that organisms do and that we're doing is rearranging what we've got so that we can foster those new abilities to thrive in these newly challenging environments. So let's think about that for your own systems. You know, how can you shift people's roles temporarily? Might there be folks who have talents that haven't been able to be used in the position that they're in, but could be used someplace else now where you really need it? Can you support folks to try things that might have been too risky before? So I think collectively, we're in a very big transition. We're in an evolutionary transition. And I'm guessing that a lot of you are experiencing that personally as well in your lives and your leadership. I want to bring one more leadership model forward. Some of you might be familiar with this. William Bridges wrote a book called Transitions. And I find this really useful now. Essentially what he says is, as leaders, we go through change all the time. We bring our people through change all the time. We're used to that. But when there is a change that is so significant that it calls our identity into question, and it has a big psychological dimension to it, that's what we're referring to here as a transition. And the important thing to remember is it's not just a phase change. We don't go from what we were to what we're becoming. There's a sequence to that. And new beginnings actually start with endings. There are things that are ending. There are things we are discarding. And there's grief that goes with that. And there's loss that goes with that. And there's letting go that goes with that. And as leaders, it's important for us to walk with our people as we go through that process together and be clear about what we're letting go of. And then you don't just flip into the new phase. There's this, Bridges calls it the neutral zone. I call it the messy middle because I don't think it's neutral at all. I think this is some of what Shereef was pointing to about this container of ambiguity, right? This is a time when there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of disorientation. It might feel like quicksand under us. We don't know. A lot of us are in that right now. It's also a time of immense creativity. It's a time for experimentation. It's a time to try things. It's this liminal in-between space where new beginnings get seeded. We're not what we were. We're not yet what we're becoming. But we can try things. It's kind of like in the natural world when an organism molts, when a bird loses its feathers or when a snake wriggles out of its skin, it's their most vulnerable time. But it's also the time, it's the most productive and creative period of cell growth. So we're in that now. And as we try things in this model, eventually the new beginning will start to become clear. The ground will get more solid. So right now we are in this messy middle time. There's no denying it. And it's a learning moment. And if you think about all the things that, I don't know, a month ago, we thought we could never do at home. And in the last 2-3 weeks, we've just pivoted and become experts at working from home and working in distributed ways. So I think these are things to look at. I just want to share one more piece here, which is 3 things that nature would suggest we do during this messy middle time of uncertainty as we are in the process of becoming something new. So the first is arouse creativity. Do this with yourself, do this with your teams. Try lots of low-risk experiments. If there were an evolutionary approach to leadership, I think it would be try lots of things, fail fast, give more attention to those things that work, and put less attention to those things that don't. So this is a time to get super creative. And you can put in the chat some ideas, some ways that you're being creative now. The second is to amplify communications. I think all of us have been talking about in one way or another. People are distanced, but that actually means we need more touch points, more frequency of connection. And communications isn't just the leader speaking to the team, although you can do that, and you can do that en masse now, but it's also having your antenna open and receiving back from your team. It's a two-way process. Tune your antenna to pick up the signals for these creative ideas that might be emerging now. And then the third is, nature would say, shorten your feedback loops. Life runs on communication, signal, response, adaptation. This is about learning how to pivot. And in the natural world, feedback loops, they're short, they're strong, they're implemented immediately. And the signal and the antenna are really well tuned to each other. So can we be doing that in our systems now? Can we practice fostering creativity, having lots of mistakes, be okay, that's how evolution happens, amplify our giving and receiving, and put things into place immediately. Just try it. It is an evolutionary moment. And I know we're nearing the end of time, but I just want to remind us that we are not going to be the same when we come out of this cocoon as we went in, personally, organizationally, or in society. So how we lead differently now really matters. And the things that we say now and do now have an outsized impact with our teams.
And folks, before people drop, I just want to say, we're going to stay on longer here. So if you're like, darn, I wish you told us this would be an hour and a half, we're not planning on that, but we will stay on for at least another 15 minutes to do some Q&A and continue the conversation here. And I just want to let people know that before you might drop in a couple minutes, that if you'd like to stay on, please do. And if you can't, we will share the recording with you, but we'd love to hear some of your questions and some of your comments. Toby, thank you so much. That is genius. And one of the reasons I thought it was, and we thought it was really important to include that perspective is, again, because we're dealing with the unknown right now. Right? In normal times, you might say, this webinar sounds cool. Oh, nature stuff, that sounds really cool. I love nature, I have a garden, but I need to focus on getting that report out. And now you're here because you're thinking, I don't know what to do. So great, if amoebas know how to do it, I'm down to learn from the amoebas. And they do know how to do it, right? Which is really brilliant. Toby, there are a couple people asking, okay, so specifically now, how can I work with my organization? So I saw one person in the chat ask, what's a process by which an organization could determine what's essential and what's not essential, right? Sounds good in theory, but how do we do that practically? So I know you've done lots of strategic planning work and OD work. What are some, maybe 1 or 2 practices or tools that you can recommend to folks if they want to do that?
Well, I think that's a really good question right now, because what we don't know is what we are moving toward. So we don't know what's essential for the future, but I think we can tap into what is it about our work, whether it's profit or nonprofit, about our organization, that if we didn't have this, if we weren't doing this, we wouldn't be who we are. It's core and central, that if you strip everything else away, and you can even go through an experiment and a process with each other where you say, what about this? Can we lose this and still be who we are? Yep. What about this? Can we lose this and still be who we are? Yeah. What about this? Can we rearrange this and still be who we are? And just keep peeling away. Why do we really exist? What is our core essential reason for being? And you might be surprised by what you find.
Yeah. And the other thing we've been doing at the People Piece on maybe every 6 months, but now we're really accelerating that, is take it down to the level of workflow, right? Think about the function you might direct, the area of the organization you might direct. And now it's time to dust off that workflow that you created, that Excel sheet with the 10 steps, or in our case, the 500 steps for planning a training and executing a training, and go back and say, in this reality, let's look line by line at each step we take to do our work. Let's break it down. And if we haven't done it, let's do it now. And then ask what's essential, what needs to be what needs to be discarded, and what could be changed. And I would also add maybe what could be added, but in a sense that's the additive piece, right? Of moving that DNA around and combining it. Mm-hmm. So that's something very specific you can do. And that's a great way to empower people as well, to say, hey, I really care, you're in this function, you're in this function. I'd love you to get together in functional groups or teams. Break down your workflow, your process for delivering a product or a service or selling it or whatever it is that you're doing, whether you're nonprofit or for-profit, and really come back and explain to the team what you think we really need to keep, what we need to get rid of, and then what we need to add or change. And most likely the changes you come up with will changes that you probably should have done a year ago, and this is just the kick in the butt to do it. And others will be ones that really will work for this environment. I think the other thing to consider as leaders too, to Toby, is also that so Ricardo asked, and I love this, how do we focus on being responsive and not reactive? And the interesting thing about the human species, unlike others that we know of, is that our minds really get in the way, and we start getting kind of too scared or too impulsive or too reactive. And so Toby, what's the advice you have for folks also not to swing so far the pendulum to say, let's throw everything out and start anew, and then the organization dies or the funding disappears?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. It's interesting, in the natural world, when times get harder, there's actually more cooperation and more partnership. So one of the things that we might really be careful about throwing out is some of our work with our allies, some of our partnerships. Those are going to serve us perhaps in ways we don't know now. And again, it's those feedback loops, I think, are super critical. We think we have feedback in our systems. I do an annual performance review. No, can we be listening in other ways where every time we get a signal back, we're measuring that against our core values, our core purpose, our central team, what's most important to us? We don't know. We might make some mistakes, but just keeping, staying, I heard a quote from a Nigerian elder who said, things are so urgent now, we've got to slow down. And I think Shilpa addressed that too, and so did Shereef, right? So that reactive pattern where we just get rid of everything, I think happens when we're a little more speeded up. We need to listen in different ways now, and slowing down is a big part of that.
I love that. I'm glad to see so many people still on here. I'd love to go to Q&A and also just hear some more from our presenters. Before we do that, Marina, could you, so just sort of show of hands or thumbs up, who would be interested in exploring this topic more with any of the presenters that you heard today, with this group? Maybe doing, we could do, you could actually do a thumbs up on your Zoom. So there's reactions there. So thanks, Jeremiah, for showing us that. So if you're interested in that, if you look at the bottom right of your screen, right near Leave Meeting, don't click near Leave Meeting, but just to the left of it, there are reactions. If you would be interested in potentially, we gather like this on a regular basis, or there's an online course that you could participate in, or some kind of regular learning or conversation about this, just go ahead and put a thumbs up next to your name. And then we'll get a sense from folks if folks are interested in continuing this. I think, one thing I didn't say at first, because a lot of webinars are saying this, but it's true. I mean, we're leading a webinar on navigating uncertainty. And so we're certainly not pretending to have all the answers for you today, or really many answers. We just have perspectives, and there's lots more to dig into here. So I saw lots of thumbs up, which is cool. So just a little housekeeping on follow-up, and then I'd love to continue the conversation. We'll follow up with you with an email with resources and also invitations if you want to stay connected with us, and then we'll also have a recording for this call. People piece right now is going into companies, including some of the companies on this call, and helping them shift a lot of the learning and development they were doing to a more remote platforms, right? So right now there may be certain decision makers who are saying, we can't afford to do learning and development right now. We can't afford to do leadership development. We got to focus on the essentials. And that might be the time for you, because you're on this call, to stand up and say, actually, that is really essential. We're going to need leadership more than ever to get us through this time. So we should actually double down on that, right? Because I know there's a lot of folks in this field on this call, and a lot of folks who believe in the work. So if you're interested in chatting more with us, just shoot us an email or be in touch, and we can talk to you about how we can work with your organization around developing leaders and teams and cultures during times of stress and also good times as well. Toby, are there any BSI offerings that we're also doing a webinar next week for HR professionals on how to continue to drive learning and development during crisis and pandemic. Toby, anything on the BSI front that you want to mention before we go to the questions?
Yeah, please do be in touch with us as well. We have a fingers crossed that we can still offer a living systems leadership workshop. This one's particularly for women this summer in August. If you're interested, shoot me an email, toby@nets.com, and we can get you information about that, or I think we'll have some follow-up. In the follow-up, you'll have all of our information, website, and email. We also do work inside organizations through the nature-inspired lens, and we do one-on-one coaching with executives. I'm working on trying to get some support so that some of the coaching and organizational work could be done at a highly reduced rate, because it feels like nature's wisdom is really important right now, and we need to open up some pathways to make that available for people. So looking at trying to get some funding for that, particularly in the nonprofit space. And just, let's stay in touch.
Awesome. Shilpa, is there like an event you have coming up or anything you want people to know about Yes, the organization that you direct?
We have a lot of events slated for the summer and the fall. We'll see if those happen, but in the meantime, we are creating some different kinds of online offerings, and I'll be in touch about them. Yeah.
Okay, great. And then Shereef, do you need help on the farm there? What's going on?
If anybody knows much about hydroponics, shoot me a link. I'm studying them. Really fun.
Okay, beautiful. So let's go back to the four sort of areas, or really the 60 areas that we managed to put into 4 buckets here, because we're facilitators, so we love 4 buckets and quadrants and stuff. It's really fun, really cool, really proud of ourselves, and we developed that. And let's go to some Q&A now in the chat. So just chime in on chat what questions you have. We might call on people to actually speak up a bit and share a little bit more. But let's keep going here. We have some time. I'd say we could even go beyond 12:15, maybe 12:20, 12:30. What questions do you have for any of the presenters, and/or what comments do you want to throw into the chat that you're interested in us pontificating more about here, or just discussing as a group and learning about? So go ahead and just drop anything in the chat. And it may be something really specific that you're thinking, hey, I heard this concept. How do I do that with my team or my organization specifically? So let's see what questions we have start coming in here. One question as we're waiting for those to come in that I have for the presenters is, so we have, let's see, it looks like somebody has his hand up. So Frank Wenin, can you go ahead and maybe unmute yourself and ask us that quick question that you have? And so what's your question, Frank?
So I've been meditating on the future of work and money long before now, and it's been on my mind to want to approach Toby. I'm in the next town over relatively, and I guess how can we come up with some sort of model of multi-stakeholder cooperative that can be replicated, something that people can want to be a part of, that could serve as some sort of roadmap for the future? That's sort of why I'm on here, because I think we're all trying to figure it out means. We're trying to look for, if there is a model, how can we collaborate and start looking at what does work, what is working, and how we can share it with the group.
Yeah, I'm not sure I have an answer for you on that, Frank, but I think that it's a super question. And I think that those kinds of deeper, broader conversations about what is work going to look like, what is money going to look like, are starting to emerge around the edges. We're 3-4 weeks into this now, and some people were going to that immediately. A lot of folks have just been trying to like take care of home base and what does my habitat look like. But I think that those are the big questions, right? Like this is calling everything into question, particularly about how we live in relationship to this planet, particularly about how we live in the face of climate change. This might be the beginning of many, many disruptions. And how do we use these technological platforms that we have now? It's great that we're neighbors, right? And just down the road and we can have these conversations in person, but now we can have them globally. So thank you for that call. And I think it is something that needs to emerge. I'd love to hear what Roni and Shilpa and Shereef have to say about that too. How do we start to have those kind of conversations that are creative and generative?
Can I shoot you an email and we can go back and forth and eventually bring something to the group?
Sure.
Thank you.
Great. Looking forward.
One of the ways that I think about this to ground this a little bit in organizational life, I think, I'll have Shereef speak about ways to reimagine the economy because he does that all the time. And I say, buddy, it's not going to happen. But he's the one who bought Bitcoin at like 300. So what do I know? But in terms of how I see it with organizational life, Frank, I think the root of your question really comes in terms of how can we really think about fundamentally doing this whole thing differently, right? And whether that's money or not, to me, there's a deeper question there. And I think it goes back to what I said earlier of right now, I think there is a fundamental debate, and more than a debate, there's a fundamental struggle happening in this country and around the planet of, is it, I got my back and you got yours and we'll fight it out so I can get more resources from you, and that's how it's always been, that myth? Or is it a different myth or a different idea that our story lies and our resilience and our safety and security lie in the collective, in interdependence, right? And so when I think about that, I think about companies like Carollo. There's a lot of Carollo engineers, leaders on this call. That's a company that we've partnered with now for 2.5 years that clearly has in mind its stakeholders. One of its values is integrity. So Carollo will never, never throw one of its partners, one of its customers, one of its vendors under the bus. It just wouldn't do that. It's part of the DNA to make sure that Carollo thrives when other folks thrive as well, right? The same is true for Whole Foods. When we were working with Whole Foods executive teams, when Whole Foods works with vendors, in our experience, it's been a very cooperative relationship. So we can think about that in our organizations. Do you have somebody who makes the photocopies for your brochure, all the way up to, your biggest funder, your biggest customer? How can we continue to develop and really stand for cooperative relationships with them, mutually beneficial relationships, including and especially when times are really tough. And we feel like, right now my back's against the wall, so I got to get whatever I can from that contractor, that vendor, that whatever, actually is to flip that and say, if I'm transparent, if I'm open, if I'm supportive, then that's going to be helpful. And we certainly do that with boundaries. We don't want to be taken advantage of. But that's something that comes to mind for me. I think what I actually want to do is move to a next question, because I know we can talk about this piece a lot, but I think maybe Shereef and Shilpa could share some resources on an email that we'll send more about this. What are some other questions that we have from folks that folks are really interested in? I'm seeing if anybody could. So I want to ask people to actually just throw their questions in the chat, because we'll be quicker there. So rather than raising your hand, just go ahead and type your question in the chat. So for Toby, how do we use biomimicry and life's principles to accompany individuals, teams, and organizations by going beyond the metaphor? So I think what I'm taken by that is, what are some other specific things I could have, and maybe reading that a different way?
Yeah, well, this clearly comes from a biomimicry person, or somebody who's interested in it. Life's Principles is a body of work that my partners at Biomimicry 3.8 distilled, which is all of what every organism does on life. There are 26 principles. If you're an earthling, you do these things. So there are things like building from the bottom up and cultivating cooperation, as you were just pointing out, Roni, and using feedback loops. And a big part of Biomimicry for Social Innovation's work is taking those principles and distilling them into leadership practices that we can apply in really tangible ways beyond the metaphor. Like, how does life actually do that? And how can we build structures? How can we build processes? How can we build behaviors that correspond with what 3.8 billion years of evolution has taught us are successful strategies? It's more than we can get into right now, but check out our website. We did a webinar a week or so ago about the first in that series, which is attuning to local context. How do you attune to your local context as a starting place before you move into adaptive change and before you start looking at how you can plan from there? So there's a lot to that. And sign up on our website. We'll keep you in touch with what we're doing, and we'll be offering more of these webinars as we go forward.
I love this question from Ken. Still struggling a bit to understand how we can invest in effective ways to test new realities, to test, I'm guessing, new approaches without creating more or maybe unanticipated distraction or inefficiency. That's the $10 million question right there. In Carollo's case, much bigger than that. Shereef, I'm wondering if some thoughts you might have on Ken's question there of how we can be nimble and iterative and test, but maybe especially in larger companies, how we can do that at large organizations in ways that don't create distraction or inefficiency or unanticipated consequences that actually take us away from our goal and make us less healthy in the long run.
Totally. I mean, I would go back to what Toby was saying, which is the quick feedback loops. So the first test you're looking for is, what's the cheapest test in terms of money, resources, time, anxiety, uncertainty, like not adding more of those things as much as possible, that has the quickest feedback loop, right? So look for cheap, low costs in terms of your own stress and anxiety, the quickest feedback loop possible. And I would even look for, there are probably things already happening that you're just not collecting the feedback on. You might need to run, you might not need to change a behavior, but actually just look for, have we checked actually if that thing is working, or have we checked if we're getting feedback on that thing? And then I would always introduce new things as an experiment, or as a for now, as a for the next 2 weeks. Like when we took our son, for example, out of school to start homeschooling him 6 months ago. And we didn't say, hey, for the rest of your life, we're going to be unschooling you. You will never go to school again. We said, we want to try and experiment with you for 4 weeks. And at this time, we'll see how to have time bound it so that people are not stressed out. I don't want to do this. I will never see my friends again, or whatever, however people will stress out, and draw a line far into the future. Keep it time bound, choose something cheap, very quick feedback loop. Decide what you're going to measure before you start the test, so that you're not at the end going, what did we say we wanted to measure here? What, did this work or not? So you have to decide what success looks like, what failure looks like. And like Toby was saying, listen closely. Allow yourself to be surprised by what happens from it. And I would say you're really good at this, Ron, introducing a playful, like, hey, why not play with this? Why not right now? This is a good opportunity to, introducing, everybody wants to play. And that's not in a frivolous way, but in an experimental, like, let's co-create here. So I would introduce some humor and some playfulness into the tests as well. And that reduces the anxiety of it.
Okay, good. So I haven't just been annoying. I love that, Shereef. And Ken, there's a great book on that. It's for startups, but it's really for everyone. It's called The Lean Startup. And what it basically does is applies the scientific method, in a sense, to business. So I put it in the chat. I think right now, have you and every leader at Carollo read the first 100 pages or listen to it. It'll take you a couple hours to listen to it or read it. And it basically, the basic principles there are you want to come out with a test, and that test needs to be an MVP. So it's a minimum viable product, right? You may have heard this term before, you may not have. Whether you provide a service or a product, you figure out what is that minimum viable product that we can put out there to our customer to get feedback. And even before that, it's very much an approach so here's one thing to say, I'll step back. Personally for you, this may be a challenge. Personally for you, this may be exactly how you roll. Organizationally for you, this may be a challenge. So if you're a group of civil engineers like Carollo Engineers is, where you're doing 10-year projects that are planned out meticulously, to suddenly shift gears and say, okay guys, now what we're gonna do is run 3-day experiments or 3-week experiments, that is a big shift in your culture. So one of the things I think you'll run up against is, how do we build on the strengths this culture already has in order to say, hey guys, we're actually wired for this in these ways. Let's go and try doing these shorter experiments and maybe show how much it'll work and show how much money it'll save. So I think if you read a bit of Lean Startup, you'll get just a sense of the basic methodology, and then go for it. It's part of what Toyota did around its manufacturing process, and took it from a car company that was struggling to one of the most successful companies ever. basically. They were able to reduce their costs tremendously and become more efficient. So there's a lot there on that. I love that question. Let's see what other questions are coming in here. So, and my co-presenters are welcome to just chime in or also read what other question is. One question I see here is around coaching. There's a great collective opportunity right now to heal individually and collectively. I'll keep going back to Carollo because there's a lot of Carollo leaders on the call here. One of Carollo's values is environment. So empowerment. So whether you're looking at the question of coaching from you're a coach, or question of coaching as a leader, you want to help people heal, or maybe you're looking at coaching more as a question of how do I empower others to take ownership right now? The question here is, how can we best serve people as coaches right now? And is one-on-one coaching still an option even for folks? So Toby, maybe I'll turn it to you because that's part of your practice is coaching, and any thoughts on the role that coaching can play right now, and maybe how coaching might be a little different during these times, or maybe how it can be exactly the same, whether you're a coach or whether you're coaching within an organization.
Coaching is really important right now. There's lots of questions about how to pay for it, of course, how to resource it. And I think it's important for us to recognize that even though we're sharing this experience of this global pandemic with people around the world, we have very, very different experiences individually and in different communities that people are going through. So some people are still very well resourced. You know, they have their job and they're grateful for it and they're making a paycheck and they're probably spending less. And so those resources are available. Many people do not have resources now. And I think one of the things that we want to collectively be thinking about is how do we spread resources around now during this critical time so that people have the resources they need for whatever it is. But in terms of coaching in particular, you know, particularly for leaders, a lot of us, as you all were talking about earlier in the call, we're doing everything we can to communicate confidence and to support our folks and to try to support ourselves. And leaders are often very isolated and alone in that process. So this is a time when it really helps to get on a Zoom call and have somebody there who's just there to support you. It could be peer coaching. There's a lot of support that we can get from one another, but let's not forget how vital it is to have somebody across the way there who's listening, who's holding you up, who's receiving your pain, who's receiving your ambitions, who's just a steady presence. I think coaching can be critical. And Zoom is actually a really good way to do it. So I support coaching. I would love to see all of us, whatever income level, whatever communities, that everybody has that opportunity for real one-on-one support.
Yeah, and that's something that Toby offers through Biomimicry for Social Innovation. It's also something that the People Piece offers, and you know, if you're in a place like the Bay Area, it used to be that you could just go on the BART and just say, any coaches here on the subway, and you'd have 5 hands go up. So you probably don't have a shortage of coaches in your life. If you happen to have a shortage, you can reach out to us and we can connect you. But I think that's a great point. Nadia is also asking you, Toby, a question. I love this. Curious to know how nature handles cognitive and stress responses, and how this could be applied to mental health issues in humans. And so when I hear the word mental health, it can conjure up, oh, you know, that's them. But all of us are experiencing anxiety right now. And so maybe if it's not so much a formal coaching relationship, what can leaders on this call keep in mind about what nature does when there's stress in the system?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. You know, nature doesn't do what we tend to do, which is hunker down and separate. I think there's more, as I was saying earlier, I think this is a really key part that, particularly in situations of mutualism, it's called in biology, where, and you know, people think nature is all about competition, but that's actually not so. It's much more this intricate web of connectedness and cooperation, and as Suzanne Simard, the tree biologist, calls it, the wood wide web in the forest. There's so much interdependency going on. And during times of stress, that interdependency and those mutualisms actually increase. And there's lots of examples of it, you know, I just had an experience last summer where I was camping in a forest, and all of a sudden, all these different organisms were talking to each other. They were all making noise and calling back and forth, the squirrels and all different kinds of birds, and the sound just got really loud. And I realized that it was because there was a bear on the ridge nearby walking across. So in times of stress, organisms hook up. How can we help each other? Where they might not have hooked up so much before. So I think that's one thing to just keep in mind, and particularly now, we really are in this together, and we really do need each other. And I'm going to give some more thought to other stress patterns, but I think that's a good place to start.
Yeah, great. Well, folks, this has been so rich, and I wish we could keep going, but we do have to respect folks' time, including our own presenters who have other commitments. So we're going to just conclude with one closing thought here, and then we'll wrap up. And the question I have for our presenters is, what do you hope or even see that this current crisis, how will this current crisis impact leadership? How might it impact leadership or organizations in a way that is positive? And so just one nugget, what's one way that you hope this crisis will impact organizations and leaders in a way that is positive? What's one way that leaders or organizations might grow through this? Or maybe you're already seeing that growth. So that's a question to Shereef and Shilpa and Toby, and then we'll wrap. Let you mull on that for a sec.
I have a weird answer for that, which is I really benefit from thinking about the fact that death is coming for me, for everyone I love, for everyone on this call, for my children. And there's something about knowing that I'm going to die and remembering that, and leading my organization, my family, my friendships with that perspective that actually kind of relaxes me and allows me to allow what matters to matter and what's not important to fall away. And my hope is that as this is kind of collective danger is here, that we kind of relax into, oh, we're all going to die, and let's act accordingly, and not sort of try not to die, or try and build things that never die, or try and fight it, but rather let's dance towards our demise together joyfully, and let what doesn't matter not matter.
I don't know if anybody wants to follow that, but Shilpa and Toby. Thank you, Shereef.
I think what's coming to me is a lot of curiosity, and I just invite our child, like our inner child, to come out more and play, because I was thinking about this yesterday, that this is such a time, like when I was a kid, I really also didn't know what was coming. Life was a bit mysterious, and if I can open myself up and be more curious and playful in that mystery, I can have a lot better time. And I will also see a lot more opportunities to lead and to support other leadership, because I'll see this see with new eyes, in this moment. And so I think that's what it's also offering me, is this chance to kind of look deeper, look with more curiosity, look like a child, and try to find that joy in those subtle distinctions that are really inspiring right now. They're everywhere, actually. There's incredible amounts of beauty unfolding in this moment too. And if I can tap into that beauty and bring that up, and tap into the beauty of every person that I'm with and interacting with, I think we're just going to find ourselves with so much more on the other side. So, yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you, Shilpa and Shereef. I think what I would add from a different angle is, I think many people who are in this room together, this Zoom room, have long thought that our world needs to change, and that there are systems and structures that are in place that are unjust, and that are filled with inequities, and there's a lot about our society that needs to break down and be recrafted in new ways. And we're having a taste of that experience now. And I think we are, in personal ways and in organizational ways and in societal ways, we're developing that capacity to let that which is not needed fall away, and envision the beautiful, connected world that we think could be possible, and that we know could be possible, and we're generating now together. So while this is very unstable, there's also, I really feel like our capacity to birth things in a new way is really being strengthened.
Thank you, Toby. I think the reason I asked the question in part is because I don't know. But one thing I just will say is, what I feel drawn to do right now is be in nature a lot and garden, and slow the F down a little bit. I'm from New Jersey, so I could say that, and I can notice the old pattern of, contracts are going away, so sell more, so market more, so try to get. And maybe just take a cue from what's happening and slow down a bit and continuously remember that, like Shereef said, it's not going to last forever. And we might think, like maybe we saw our parents do, that if you just work hard, you're retired at whatever, and then all this time goes by that we've spent trying to achieve, whether we're in the for-profit or the nonprofit world. And maybe this is a good time for us to get yet another kind of kick in the butt, a reminder from life that yes, achievement is great and doing great things is great. And also so is working in your garden and being with your friends and enjoying a beautiful day and, tutoring your niece at math over Zoom because you suddenly have the time to do it and the technology to do it. So just hopefully this will help us remember, as Shereef beautifully said, I think what's really important. And it's like when you're sick, suddenly you cut away all the fat. You don't pick up the phone. You say, sorry, I can't help you with that right now. And you just focus on what's really important. And so maybe we are in this collective sickness right now, but we can take that into our lives afterwards and just remember that even when times are kind of juicy and fat, is it really worth it to sacrifice so much of our humanity for this productivity and this accomplishment and this achievement? And that crosses from for-profit into nonprofit. It might be even worse in the nonprofit world, I'll say, because I've been in both worlds. We got to do more climate change. We got to stop it. And yes, please work on climate change. And also, let's take good care of ourselves and enjoy this life. And may that be the example for others as well. And keeping in mind the folks who maybe don't have the privilege to do that, right? And what are ways that we can support everybody to have that kind of life? So it is 12:31. We at People Peace Airlines did guarantee an on-time departure, but not necessarily an on-time arrival. I do hope that you've enjoyed our journey through ambiguity here, including the ambiguous ending time. I really appreciate you being here and sticking around to the very beautiful end here. We will be in touch with you. We'd love to stay connected with you. That'll all be in the email. Sign up for email lists, visit websites, all that good stuff. More importantly, maybe we all just carry this in our hearts moving forward and knowing that none of us are perfect as leaders. So now's the time where you're going to probably be judging yourself more than ever, and maybe let that go and be transparent. Guys, I'm doing my best and I need your help. This is really hard right now. And your team will step up if you have the right people there. And I'm sure you do. So we will be in touch, and we'll let you know too if maybe we organize a longer session next time, or some kind of online course that folks can take with these speakers and maybe others as well to continue. Marina or Nicole, are there anything else that we need to say to folks before we sign off here? I was going to say chime off, kind of like that. Anything else we need to add? Are we good? Looks like we're good. Okay. Folks, thanks you so much. And may you be healthy and safe, and may your people and your families and your communities be healthy and safe. And feel free to unmute yourself and just say bye, or whatever it is that you want to say. A lot of communities have been doing this.
Thank you very much. Great discussing all. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
Thank you all so much. Great to see you. We'll be in touch.
Thank you.